guys, welcome back to the Replay Media. I think we all share a certain passion for our history as humans, though the boring history classes in high school certainly don't help much. Fortunately, the cinema industry learned from the beginning to capitalize on historical events to create great movies. But if you think that watching movies like that will make you an expert historian, I'm sorry to tell you that you're wrong. Some movies just use a certain event as a pretext to sell tickets and use creative licenses in the narrative. That's normal. They are movies after all. They should not be documentaries, although some of them make unforgivable mistakes. Without further ado, let's take a look at the most inaccurate historical films in the industry. Napoleon 2023, directed by Ridley Scott. We start with a film that we have quite fresh in our memory. Since its official announcement, Napoleon generated great expectations among moviegoers. While there are already numerous films featuring France's most famous emperor, Ridley Scott's proposal was the most ambitious project around this historical character and his feats. In addition, Joaquin Phoenix will be the protagonist. It was a formula destined for success. Even many were already positioning it for the Oscars before its release, but the final result was weird. Napoleon is not a bad movie, but the historical errors do it no favors. The internet was filled with historians furious with the film, most notably Alexander Macabreeze, one of the great Napoleon specialists and author of the Napoleonic Wars. According to Alexander and history itself, Napoleon never witnessed the execution of Marie Antoinette, much less bombed the pyramids of Giza. In fact, Bonaparte was a great supporter of Egyptian culture and wrote a book based on it. But undoubtedly, the worst mistake is the representation of the battles of Austerlitz, Borodino, and Waterloo. The war choreographies in the film not only look very simple, but they are completely far from Napoleon's real strategies. Even Napoleon's death is not represented in the right way. Anyway, this film has so many mistakes that we could make a video dedicated to them. Pearl Harbor 2001, directed by Michael Bay. Michael Bay is not the most prolific director in Hollywood, but we must recognize that he is good at making visual spectacles and explosions, and nothing more, because historical accuracy is not his specialty. Beyond the Transformers saga, Pearl Harbor is one of his most popular films and was a huge success upon its release. An excellent cast, stunning visual effects, and an interesting narrative for its historical errors. The most important point is obviously the attack on Pearl Harbor. According to the film, the Japanese warned the Americans of the attack only an hour before, although in the real story, they were given several hours. In addition, the Japanese planes in the film mercilessly attacked a civilian hospital, a horrible crime that never happened. No one in World War II was a saint, but at least the Japanese respected civilian buildings and even maneuvered in the air to avoid them, even though they put themselves at risk. Of course, Michael Bay wanted to give more drama to a story that didn't need it. 300, 2006, directed by Zack Snyder. Oh, Snyder, another lover of unbridled action and slow motion scenes that never end. Jokes aside, 300 is an absolute gem of epic cinema revolving around the Battle of Thermopylae, in which Sparta and Athens joined forces to stop the Persian invasion. One of the protagonists of that story was Leonidas, played by Gerard Butler in the film. His version of the character quickly became a symbol of masculinity among fans, although I wonder how they will react when they find out that in the real story, Leonidas was about 60 years old. Moreover, the soldiers in the film constantly reaffirm that they are fighting for the freedom of Greece, when in the past, it was a nation that did not exactly cooperate as a unit. On the other hand, the traitor Ephialtes was not a deformed Spartan, but a completely healthy shepherd who belonged to the tribe of Malaeos. And speaking of deformities, the Ephorians also did not suffer from that disease, and did not have leprosy. There are a few other creative licenses in 300, though that doesn't mean we'll stop training to have Leonidas' physique. The Patriot 2000, directed by Roland Emmerich. This film, while excellent, caused some controversy among historians, as the depiction of America's national hero, Francis Marion, is far from real. Starring Mel Gibson, The Patriot revolves around Benjamin Martin, a fictional character based on Francis Marion, who was a key player for the Americans during the War of Independence against the British forces. Marion's historical contribution is undeniable, but contrary to the film's gentle and family-conscious version, version, in real life, he never wiped out a British platoon on his own. The Battle of Gulliford Courthouse, one of the highlights of the film, was won by outnumbered British troops. Even worse, Marion had a really dark side, as he was known to have slaves in his possession, like all high society people at that time, murdered unarmed Cherokee Indians for sport, and abused his female slaves. I definitely prefer Gibson's version. Pocahontas, 1995, directed by Mike Gabriel and Eric Goldberg. We all know that Disney usually softens its stories so that audiences of all ages can enjoy them. But the case of Pocahontas is special. There are even people who don't know that Pocahontas existed, and she was the first Native American to legally marry a white man. Sounds nice, but before that, Pocahontas had to go through hell, which of course we didn't see in the Disney version. The real Pocahontas was 11 years old when she met John Smith, a 28-year-old English settler. Because of the huge age difference, there was no love story between them. Years later, Pocahontas was kidnapped by the British colonists to exert political control over her father, Chief of Powhatan. The natives suffered mistreatment and became a hostage of considerable importance to the British. After that, Pocahontas fell in love with John Rolfe, the founder of the Virginia tobacco industry, with whom she had a son and was married until her death at the young age of 21. Braveheart, 1995, directed by Mel Gibson. Once again, Mel Gibson starring in a masterpiece that won't do us any good on the history exam. Braveheart is possibly Mel Gibson's most popular movie and a true cinematic achievement for the time, although they had to sacrifice some historical facts to make it happen. In this film, Mel Gibson plays William Wallace, an indomitable Scottish rebel who in the 13th century led a revolt against the English under King Edward I, who ruled Scotland. He sounds like a hero of the people, but according to historians, Wallace came from a noble family. Moreover, he never met Princess Elizabeth of France, with whom he has a romantic relationship in the film. Gibson also made the mistake of dressing his characters in kilts. The plot takes place in the 13th century, and the traditional garment was not used until the 17th century. There are also mistakes in the language, the famous body makeup, and even in the ways villages and towns are depicted. Oh, and the title Braveheart never belonged to Wallace, but to Robert the Bruce. Lots of creative licenses, but when you see the result, it's impossible not to love it. Amadeus, 1984, directed by Milos Forman. Amadeus is undoubtedly one of the most prolific films in history, with a total of 8 Oscars won, including Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Actor to F. Murray Abraham for his portrayal of the tormented Salieri. Amadeus revolves around the life and music of Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, as well as his rivalry with the official court composer Antonio Salieri. The curious thing is that this hostility never existed, or at least there is no historical evidence of it. According to historians, Mozart and Salieri had a friendly relationship and admired each other. Perhaps at some point they had a subtle rivalry, but it never reached the limits of the movie, in which there are references to Salieri poisoning Mozart. In truth, Mozart probably caused his death by drinking so much, besides the fact that he was not like the childish character in the film. He had a sense of humor, but not that much. Gladiator, 2000, directed by Ridley Scott. It hurts me to mention Ridley Scott again in this list, but truth must always prevail. We must start by saying that Maximus Decimus Meritus, the ex-general turned gladiator who swears vengeance for his family, never existed, or at least not as depicted in the film. Russell Crowe's character is inspired by Marcus Nonius Macrinus, who was a senator and general of the legions in Rome. He lived in the 2nd century AD and was a general during the reign of Marcus Aurelius. He also fought against the Germanic barbarians and other northern European tribes. He is considered a war hero, although he did not have such a tragic story as in the film. In fact, he died in his upper-class residence at the age of 70. As for the antagonist, Commodus, it is true that he was one of the worst emperors of Rome and ended a long era of prosperity. However, he never killed his father, Marcus Aurelius, nor did he have incestuous relations with his sister Lucilla, nor did he die in the arena, but strangled by a a freed man. Not even the setting of Rome is correct. For context, Gladiator takes place in 180 AD, though the Aurelian Wall appears, something that was not built until 275 AD. Likewise, the Roman Colosseum was not known by that name, but by the Flavian Amphitheater. Speaking of which, Ridley Scott thought the real Colosseum was too small, so he used a larger one for the film. Those were just some of Gladiator's creative licenses, but thinking about it, they made the film more epic. I think that after this video, you will see historical movies with different eyes, but that doesn't take away from the fact that they are entertaining. We must remember that they are works of fiction based on real events. So creative licenses are the order of the day. As long as you don't use these films as an argument in a debate about history, you're safe.